Hello and welcome back to another Round the Table, number 41, from the meeting point here in Bilbao, broadcasting not only to Bilbao, but throughout the world. So this week we'll be talking about music, and we've got lots of interesting things coming up. We've got some musical vocabulary and a new vocabulary jingle, which I had to write specially for the event. We've got lots of what's the difference that came up in conversation this week, but I think we should begin with some pronunciation problems. So the first one we need to discuss is this word, live, L-I-V-E, live, which can also be pronounced live.
That's very confusing.
It is, because they look the same but they sound different, which means they are
different.
homographs is the word I was looking for. Homographs, when you write them the same, homo is the same, graph is
Graphia.
Yeah, like to write something, like graphic and graphs. So they're written the same, but they sound different. So there's live and there's live. And this came up in conversation this week because I realised that people think live is the same as life. The second one, I said life with a F. Yeah, life with a F. But live with a V is live with a voiced thing. The same as alive, and it comes from living, and that's what it means, basically. So we have live concerts. People say, I went to a live concert, which seems a bit unnecessary, really, because concerts are generally living people, aren't they? I mean, if there's a dead person on the stage, it would be a bit of a boring show, I think.
Yeah.
But we like to talk about live music, live concerts, and also live TV. Of course, you have a live TV broadcast, don't you?
Yeah, I guess it's because the pronunciation of the F and V for us is very similar.
Yeah. So what you do with your mouth is the same, but the V is a voiced version. So you go f like an F, but you vibrate your throat and go v and make that noise. V. So there's live with that straight E, that I sound, I, live. And then there's live.
Live.
Yeah, and then there's life with a F.
Life.
Live, live, and life.
Very good.
Another similar one that came up was wind and wind. So wind is the currents in the air. The wind is blowing. But wind is to turn something in a circular motion, like you wind up a clock, for example. Well, in the olden days, I'm showing my age. I'm sure there are young people listening who are thinking, what on earth is he talking about? Wind up a clock?
You can also find a windy road, can you? When it's got lots of...
That's right, yeah. It can be windy or winding. It can be winding with an ing or windy with a y, yeah. Not to be confused with windy. It's a windy day. Windy and windy would look the same, wouldn't they? Yeah, so paths can wind, yeah. And there's a sidewinder is a type of snake, a rattlesnake in Texas or somewhere like that. There's one called a sidewinder, and it's the way it moves along the ground. It's got a strange motion. Yeah, so you wind up a clock. You can also wind up people if you make them angry.
Oh, yeah.
Or you can be joking with someone. It's like pulling someone's leg. You say, it's okay, I'm only winding you up. So that's because it makes you more tense. And then you unwind when you go on holiday.
Oh, yeah.
So unwind means relax.
Yeah.
So wind is quite a good word. And it looks just like wind. Again, it's a homograph. A homograph. And then there were some other homographs that came up. Well, there was one particular one that came up because it was related to the music thing, was the verb record.
Oh, yeah.
But the noun record. So it looks exactly the same, but all you do is move the stress pattern. If you put the emphasis on the first syllable, you get record, which is a noun. And if you move it to the second, you get record, which is a verb.
So normally with 2-syllable words works like that, doesn't it? Like product, for example, or...
You're thinking produce and produce.
Yeah, produce.
Yeah. That follows the same pattern. Normally, the stress on the first syllable is the noun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And stress on the second syllable is the verb.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be like if you get perfect. Perfect is an adjective. But perfect is the verb. You can perfect something, meaning make it perfect.
Yeah.
But perfect in that sense is the adjective. And there are some that just don't follow the rule. Some of them have the same stress on the noun and the verb, and it doesn't change. But
so there's no rules.
No, it's English, isn't it? It's English. But generally, there are quite a lot, like convict and convict, produce, and things like that. There's quite a lot of them, and maybe I should compile a full list and do a program just about that, maybe. Anyway, that was the pronunciation problems for this week. They weren't big problems, but they were interesting aspects of pronunciation, I thought. And then we had a whole load of things that come under the What's the Difference category. And a lot of these are quite familiar ones that you've all heard before. So, of course, there is election and choice. Generally speaking, we tend to use election. Oh, that's noisy. The neighbours are using their water again. Apologies for the background noise if you're hearing that. Election is normally used for political things, when you are choosing a politician. But there are occasions when people use election that's not in that context. You can elect to do something, but it's not that common in normal speech. Just because it's that same old thing of the election word. The elect is very Latin, so we have the word choice, which is much better. You choose to do things. Then there's another one which might be actually under pronunciation problems, because there's colleague, your workmate. In fact, I prefer workmate myself to colleague. It sounds a bit posh. Colleague, someone you work with, and college, where you study. A lot of people get confused with those two. And then we had a lot of what's the difference to do with being old. Somebody was talking about ancient times. So we were talking different words for old. And there are a few of them. I've got a few here. Well, there's old, which is basically useful for anything. Anything can be old. Yeah? But ancient, if you say something is ancient, it has to be either really, really old and you're using it as a sort of an exaggerated way of speaking. Saying my neighbour is really ancient. You wouldn't really use it for people, but you could if you were exaggerating. Yeah. Normally ancient is when you're talking about Romans and Greeks and ancient history and ancient times, like thousands of years ago. And then you've got antique, and that's normally used for furniture.
Yeah, because that comes to your mind, brings to your mind the shops, what they sell antiques.
Yeah, antique shops normally have furniture, some clocks maybe, paintings, that kind of thing. They can be antique. Then you get vintage. Vintage has changed a bit recently. You used to have vintage cars, and I can't remember how old a car has to be vintage. I think it's 25. It's not that much, really. Vintage cars are old-fashioned cars. Originally, it was for wine. Okay. The vintage of the wine was the year the wine was produced, and that is the vin in the vintage refers to wine, like vin in French.
Yeah.
The vintage. That's my French pronunciation. The vintage of the wine was the age of it. So then it applied to cars. Now it seems to apply to clothing. You seem to get these clothing shops that have vintage clothing from the 70s or something.
It's funny how it sounds so cool when it's vintage and not so good when you say old-fashioned.
Yeah, old-fashioned is very negative, isn't it?
Yeah, and people buy like this vintage furniture now, and it looks like they pay a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, retro is another word we use, isn't it? Retro for vintage clothing. Retro is just like, what's it short for? Retrospective or something like that? Is that looking back at the past is retrospective, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think if you have a retrospective, if you are a painter and there's an exhibition called a retrospective, I think you're looking back over their career at all the work they've done. So maybe retro clothing is looking back at the 70s or something like that. And then finally we've got elderly, because for some reason old and older can change to elder when we're talking people. So elderly people are retired people, senior citizens, as they're sometimes referred to.
And again, it doesn't sound so negative if you say elderly.
No, my elderly neighbour. It sounds quite nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But my old neighbour doesn't sound very nice, That's why it's useful sometimes if you talk about your old friend. Because sometimes old friend can be someone you've known for a long time, or it can be someone who's old.
Yeah.
So elderly for people. So there are quite a few words there that are referring to age. Another what's the difference here? Again, this was music related. Myth and legend. A myth and a legend. Yeah. A myth is a story that isn't true.
Yeah.
But a legend could be true.
Okay.
So, King Arthur and Robin Hood are both legends because they're probably based on something that really happened, but the stories have been changed over the years.
Yeah.
But there probably were characters who they were based on. Maybe not all the stories are perfect, but they probably existed in some form. So they're legends, but dragons and fairies and things like that, they're myths, because everybody knows that those things don't exist. The Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, unfortunately... Unicorns, they're mythical, they're mythical. They're also fantastic, but the word fantastic has changed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That used to be related to fantasy, but now it's not. So the reason it came up in conversation is because we have legends of music, like rock legends. You know, Bob Dylan is a legend, and Neil Young. They're not mythical because they really existed, but we often refer to legends of rock. Yeah, so that was the word. That's why we had that problem there. Another couple of what's the differences. The word chorus. People often use the word chorus incorrectly.
For a group of people, probably,
yeah. In some contexts it can be, but normally the chorus is the bit that everybody sings along to.
Yeah.
The bit in a song that everybody knows because it's repeated all the time.
Yeah.
That's the chorus. There are the verses that usually don't get repeated. Sometimes verse number 1 can appear at the end again. Usually the verses are different, and then the chorus is the repetitive bit.
And that's the lyrics, it's not the letters.
Oh, yeah, it's the lyrics, yeah. You can say the words of the song if you want to, but the technical term is lyrics. Yeah, so the verses and then the chorus. But the group of people is called a choir, and that's a very strange word. It's not difficult to pronounce, it just doesn't look like anything like the word when you see it written, but it's pronounced choir. Choir. Yeah, sometimes a group of people can be a chorus. In a musical, for example, they have the chorus line. I like all the less important people on the stage. You've got the main actors that do the majority of the singing. The people behind are the chorus line. Another couple of words then are hymn and anthem. This word hymn, H-Y-M-N, looks very strange. Just pronounced hymn. The same as him and her. So the difference between hymn and anthem.
I think we've discussed this before.
Have we? Oh, well, people should have been listening last time because they've been making the same mistake this week. A hymn is a religious song. You sing hymns in churches, whereas anthems represent some form of organisation. So you have national anthems. Maybe we discussed it with nationalities a while ago. You have national anthems. And yes, in some companies they have anthems. If you work for Mitsubishi, we were discussing it before, yes. They sing a song in the morning before they start work. That would be an anthem. And if you sing the athletic song, yeah. Mm-hmm. You're not going to do it for me.
I can see you go.
Anyway, so an anthem represents some group of people or some organisation of some sort. So that is all the What's the Difference for this week. Now we've got a new jingle written specially for the event. People don't realise that I write all my own jingles. Have I told you that? Well, I do. I had to
Why do you write your jingles if you don't really write them? You play them. You don't write the...
Oh no. I suppose people used to write them when they put them on paper, but I don't. Okay, I made it up. I use a phrasal verb. I made it up. I found it in the guitar. It was already there, waiting to be discovered. Yeah, it was just there, yeah. Anyway, here's a new jingle. It's the new vocabulary jingle. So, some of the vocabulary that came up this week. We were talking about vinyl records. That's pronounced vinyl, the old material that used to be used for making records. Vinyl records and discs. You could refer to them as discs. Usually we say record, but disc does exist. Then you've got a single, sometimes called 45s, which is just one song. Those are the ones that go into the charts, as sometimes called the charts, the top 20. That's the charts. It used to be called the hit parade in the olden days, back in the early 60s. The hit parade. So those are the singles. And then you get an album, which is a collection of songs on a record. Those are 33s, but they're called long players, LPs they can be called. LPs are long players or albums. And then you have a record label. The different companies that publish records are called labels. So you get CBS and you get Virgin is a record label, and Island, they were the ones that did all the reggae songs, Island Records. And then we were talking about singers. So you got a lead singer is the main singer in the group, because sometimes the others sing a bit as well, but there's the main one is called the lead singer or the lead guitarist, because normally there's the guitarist that does the majority of the complicated things, the impressive stuff, and the others are just strumming behind. Okay. When you go bring bring bring, I should demonstrate. I have a guitar right here. Should I demonstrate?
If you want.
I'll demonstrate. This is a strum. That was a minor. That was a minor. Lovely sound. Anyway, that's a strum. So some people just do that behind, don't they? That's the easy stuff. Then there's picking. That's picking, that is. Or finger picking. Put that down again before I get carried away. So you got the lead singer, the lead guitarist, and then you got the backing singers. Mm-hmm. So it's not really a choir unless you've got a lot of them. If there's 3 of them, they're called backing singers. Okay. Then you can also have a backing band.
Oh.
So sometimes if you went to a concert, if you went to see someone who was like, we were talking about Madonna or Lady Gaga, we don't really care who the guitarist is, do we?
No, really, no.
We don't even know their names.
Mm.
You have to read the notes on the record sleeve. No, the sleeve is the thing. When you buy a record, it's inside a sleeve. Anyway, the backing band are the ones that are there to support the main artists. Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you can also have a backing track if something is pre-recorded for you to play. So if you were doing karaoke, for example, that's a backing track, and you sing on top of it.
Okay.
So they're called backing tracks. We don't use playback. Okay, there might be a specific use for playback, but normally you would say someone is miming.
Oh yeah, we say playback. Yeah.
They're miming if they're just pretending to sing.
Yeah.
Or they'd be singing over a backing track. If sometimes when they do it on TV, sometimes the singer might be live. The singer's really singing, but the musicians are pretending.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'll be singing over a backing track. Sometimes they'll be miming. But we don't normally use playback, although it probably does exist in the record industry in some form. Another one is a session musician. We should have put this in pronunciation problems as well. Session musician. One of the most difficult things for people to say, because you begin with a s and then sh. So it goes sesh, like that. Sesh. Session. And then musicians goes muse. It's got a bz in the middle. Muse-ish with a sh. And then it finishes on a z for the plural. Session musicians. And that's very difficult to say. Anyway, what are they? Yes, that was the question. It's vocabulary, not pronunciation. They are people that are hired especially to make a recording. And they're not necessarily in a fixed band. Sometimes they're part of the record company. So my example was, if the Rolling Stones are making a record and they want saxophones, there's no one in the band who plays saxophone, so they just get one in for the recording purposes. Or they might appear on the stage sometimes.
What about jam sessions?
Oh, a jam session. A jam session is when lots of people get up together who don't, sometimes they don't even know each other. And they usually improvise. So it's normally on some sort of structured music that follows a pattern. So you get blues jams a lot because blues follows a very strict pattern, which allows you to improvise and make stuff up because everybody knows approximately where you're going to be at the same time.
Okay.
So you can do sort of, it looks very free and improvise, but it's because there is a structure underneath it that allows you to improvise on top of it. And jazz is the same, apparently. If you get into jazz and study it, according to musician friends that I have, they say there are fixed patterns to a lot of jazz, so that's why they can just get in and join in with it because they know where it's going. So those are jams.
I never thought about it, but blues or jazz were so predictable because I thought people learn. Well, now I'm saying it, learn it by ear.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because it's very structured.
Yeah, there's only a few patterns to blues. You get 8-bar blues and 12-bar blues and things like that. And if you play it, as soon as you start, you know where it's going, and that you can just sort of nod to each other and take it in turns to improvise things. And that. Apparently, jazz is the same, but I've never really understood jazz. It's a bit more complicated, in my opinion. So anyway, those are jam sessions because apparently people used to jam together. So jam when you put something into a very tight space.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like a traffic jam and everything stops moving. So if you jam lots of people onto the stage together, apparently that's why they're called jam sessions. And then there's another similar thing is the open mic sessions. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Because like down the pub, when we go down the Reform, they have open mic. Yeah, but it's not the same as the jam when we were in the blues bar in London. Yeah. Because at the open mic, 1 or 2 people get up together and they have their 10 minutes to do their thing. And they've practiced it beforehand and they know what they're going to do. So they just get their 10 minutes with the microphone. That's why it's called open mic. Whereas the jam sessions are, you sort of say this guy's going to play the bass, this guy's going to play the guitar, and this guy's going to play the saxophone, and you put them together and they sort of make it up as they go along.
Yeah.
Sometimes they know what the song is, but like I say, most of them follow a pattern anyway. Yeah, so that's the difference between a jam and open mic. Yeah. Okay, so do you have any more questions about music? Do you want to know about scales? Do you want me to demonstrate scales on the guitar?
Yes, please.
You sound very enthusiastic. Because we were discussing this week why music sounds different in different places, yeah? That's a scale. So if you imagine you've got 12 steps, imagine going up the stairs and there's 12 steps, but you don't have to go up one step at a time. You don't have to go. Okay, you can go up 2 steps or you can go up 3 steps, and it depends where you come from. So most Europeans go up the stairs like that, because that's the normal way of doing it. But if you play a lot of blues stuff, you go up the stairs like that. It's just a different, you go up 3 steps first, and then you go up 2 steps and 2 steps, and then you go up 1 step, and that kind of thing.
I see.
So that's why that if you play that kind of stuff, it always sounds bluesy. Whatever you do with it, you just play those notes and it sounds kind of bluesy.
It does.
But if you were doing that sort of, it's always going to sound more European and like. So all that sort of, a lot of that, the white American music and Irish music and things like that all follow that kind of pattern. And then I discovered by accident one day when I was playing,
That's gypsy.
yeah, and I found it by accident, and then I looked in a book and it has a name, and it's because that pattern is the scale that they use in North African music, and because of that they use it in flamenco and stuff as well. So if you play that down the pub, they think you're really clever because it's a scale that we're not really accustomed to in most European music.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
what about Chinese? Can you do Chinese?
I can't do Chinese. I can only go, and that sounds a bit Chinese. That's the best I can do, I'm afraid. I'm a bit limited.
Okay.
I'd probably be better off cooking Chinese food than playing Chinese music. I'm kind of limited. But basically that's why different music sounds different in different cultures. And sometimes you hear Chinese music and you think that sounds awful, and it's only because the structures that they use are just more distant from the ones that we use. We're just not accustomed to.
Very interesting.
So anyway, we were discussing that, and that's what scales are. And not everyone's using the same scale. And that's why some things sound more bluesy, because apparently that sort of scale has some origins in African music, and that's why it's black American music rather than the traditional white American music. If you go back far enough, I mean, obviously they're a bit more mixed now.
Yeah.
But if you went back to the old country music, Appalachian music,
They didn't have internet back then.
no, but it was all very based on what they'd inherited from the British side of things.
I see.
So it's very similar to if you listen to Irish and Scottish music. Of course, you can't listen to old British music, like English music, because nobody bothered keeping it. It all disappeared somewhere. But apparently there's a lot of connections. Yeah, and then certain African sounds that they imported, came over with slaves, sort of got incorporated into the way they played European music. They never played it like the Europeans played it. They added some extra notes and that kind of thing. And that's where black American music came from. Yeah. And that's why gospel music is much better than the stuff. Church hymns in European religion are really boring.
Yeah.
But gospel singing is much better.
Yeah, it is.
Because there's different notes involved, basically.
Very good.
So that's a bit of music theory. I don't like music theory generally. I think it is a manacle to creativity. I think if people don't understand the rules, they're much more creative. And I think a lot of people get bogged down. There's a phrasal verb, you get bogged down. A bog is a very wet piece of land, and if you walk across it, it's very difficult to walk in. Yeah. So you get bogged down in something. It's very difficult to move when you get so many rules. It stems the creativity, I think. And sometimes if people ignore the rules, or they just don't know that there are rules, they invent some good things. And people go, but you can't do that, because they're so preoccupied. It's the same as grammar.
I was just thinking about it's the same as language, isn't it? Like, not everybody follows the rules, and there's lots of ways to do it, to express yourself.
Yeah. Because I've met classically trained, people who've studied a bit of the theory of music, and then they see some people playing, and they just go, but you can't do that. You can't do that. And it's the same as if you study English grammar, and then you go to England, and people say it differently, and you go, but that's not in the book. And it's because the people that wrote the book are always writing about the way they do it, and they're not asking everybody else. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about music.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And that's all we have time for. So now you can listen to this wonderful tune that's fading in at the moment as we leave. Wonderful jazzy piece that I also wrote myself. Well, made it up. Anyway, that's all we have time for. So have a good week. Till next week. Bye.
Bye.